The New York Giants really shouldn't be good, but Brian Daboll doesn't care. The Giants started the season 7-2 and made the playoffs at 9-7-1. New York made the trip out to Minnesota in the wild card round and beat the third-seeded Vikings. The Giants are hot ahead of a divisional matchup at Philadelphia. What New York has done this season is nothing short of remarkable. This is a very similar roster to the one that only won 4 games in 2021. Brian Daboll has completely flipped the script on the Giants and on Daniel Jones. Jones likely had one foot out of the door in New York, but all of a sudden, it looks like New York is about to ink not only him, but Saquon Barkley to a long-term deal. The Giants have been one of the biggest surprises this season, and New York isn't done yet. The Minnesota Vikings played host to the New York Giants in the NFC wild card. The two faced off in Week 16, with Minnesota pulling out a 27-24 victory on a game-ending 61-yard Greg Joseph field goal. Kirk Cousins started the scoring for the Vikings, but the Giants quickly responded with 17 unanswered points. Minnesota did find the end zone before the half to trail by 3. Both teams traded touchdowns in the third quarter before Greg Joseph drilled a 38-yard field goal to tie it with more than 12 minutes remaining. In the regular season, the Vikings somehow went 11-0 in one-score games, an NFL record. That ended in the wild card. Saquon Barkley scored a touchdown with just shy of 8 minutes remaining to take a 31-24 lead. Minnesota drove late, but ultimately turned the ball over on downs after Kirk Cousins threw a 3-yard check down on 4th and 8. New York kept Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook in check. TJ Hawkinson did have 130 yards, and Cousins passed for 270 and 2 touchdowns. Daniel Jones cooked, though. He led the Giants in rushing and passed for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. The New York Giants were widely expected to be one of the worst teams in the league ahead of the 2022 season, but that was obviously not the case. The Giants got off to a very hot start. New York beat Tennessee and Carolina in the first weeks to start the year 2-0. The Giants fell to the Cowboys in Week 3, but turned around and rattled off 4 straight wins over the Bears, Packers, Ravens, and Jaguars. New York lost to Seattle to sit at 6-2 heading into its Week 9 bye. The Giants beat the Texans in Week 10 to improve to 7-2. New York was sitting very pretty to make the postseason. The Giants had exceeded all expectations, but the playoffs still weren't a given. The Giants lost to the Lions and Cowboys in back-to-back weeks, and that set up a really huge 3-game stretch with 3 consecutive NFC East games. New York ended up tying Washington in Week 13, lost to Philadelphia the next week in blowout fashion, but responded by beating Washington in Week 14, a huge win for the Giants' playoff hopes. New York closed out the regular season 1-2 with losses to the Vikings and Eagles and the lone victory coming over the Colts. The Giants finished 9-7-1 and in the second NFC wildcard spot. The New York Giants have completely turned around in just one season, and there's one huge reason why. Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll played safety at Rochester. He got his start in coaching as a volunteer assistant at William & Mary in 1997 before he moved on to being a grad assistant at Michigan State under none other than Nick Saban. Daboll made the jump to the pros in 2000 as a defensive assistant for the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick. He stayed with New England until 2006. He spent 2 years as the quarterback's coach for the New York Jets before he got his first coordinator gig with the Cleveland Browns in 2009. Daboll jumped around the league as an OC for a few years. He did have a 4-year stretch as the tight ends coach for the Patriots from 2013 to 2016. In all, Daboll actually won the Super Bowl 5 times in New England. He then won a national championship in 2017 as the OC for Alabama. Daboll started getting a lot of recognition, though, once he became the Buffalo Bills OC in 2018. Josh Allen was just considered a project, and Daboll turned him into one of the best quarterbacks in football. He was even the assistant coach of the year in 2020. Brian Daboll finally got his name called for a head coaching vacancy in 2021. The New York Giants were 4-13 in 2021, and in Daboll's first season, they went 9-7-1 and made the playoffs. That's a huge, huge turnaround. The New York Giants wouldn't be where they are now if it weren't for Daniel Jones. And that was a huge reason for the hiring of Brian Daboll to develop and turn Daniel Jones into a starting NFL caliber quarterback. And Brian Daboll has done the impossible. Daniel Jones was the 6th overall pick at the 2019 NFL Draft. Remember, he started his rookie season as the backup to Eli Manning, who was ultimately in his last year in the league. It didn't take too long for Jones to see the field, though. He started in week 3 for the first time, and he actually ended up helping the Giants come back to beat the Buccaneers. He really wasn't too bad as a rookie. Jones went 3-9, and he threw for 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Jones hasn't thrown for more than 15 touchdowns in a season since, though. As a rookie, Jones led the league in fumbles, and he did again in 2020. He had a really tough second season in the pros, so Pat Shurmur was his head coach as a rookie, but Shurmur was fired and Joe Judge was hired ahead of 2020. Daniel Jones was terrible under Judge. He had less than 3,000 yards, only 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions in 2020. The Giants went 5-9 with him under center, and they were even worse the following season, going 4-7. Jones had career lows with just 2,400 yards and 10 touchdowns, and Jones ended up tossing 7 picks. Joe Judge only lasted 2 seasons in New York before being fired. The Giants hired Brian Daboll, and everything turned around for Danny Dimes. The Giants were 9-6-1 with him under center. He passed for 3,200 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Jones also saw a very big increased role in the run game. He had never recorded 500 yards or more than 2 touchdowns in a season. In 2022, Jones rushed for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, I don't really know how to feel about Daniel Jones. He did only have 22 total touchdowns this season. It's not like he was amazing. I don't think he's anything crazy special, but he did show up when it mattered. Like, watching the film, he was good. Jones made some big-time plays in big moments, and at the very least, that should be rewarded, and New York isn't going to find anybody else better in the open market. Saquon Barkley is likely going to get a new deal in the offseason, or at least be franchise tagged. Somehow, Saquon Barkley has gone from pretty disappointing to looking back to his old rookie self. The New York Giants used the 2nd overall pick at the 2018 NFL Draft on Saquon Barkley. Yes, they took a running back, 2nd overall, and it did work out early. He took the league by storm as a rookie. He was amazing. He had 1,300 yards, 700 receiving yards, and he found the end zone 15 total times. He ended up being the Offensive Rookie of the Year, and his future was very, very bright. And he did continue to dominate in 2019. He had over 1,000 rushing yards, but then he did slowly start to decline. Barkley suffered a torn ACL in week 2 in 2020. He was healthy the following season, but he just didn't really look like the Saquon of old. He didn't even have 600 rushing yards in 13 games. It appeared that he had kind of lost his burst, and, questions started circulating if we'd ever see the old him again. And we did. Saquon Barkley looked like Saquon Barkley this season. He had a career-high 1,312 yards and scored 10 touchdowns. Barkley made the Pro Bowl for the first time since his rookie year. The New York Giants weren't supposed to be good this season. The Giants were really bad last year. The year before that, the excuse was the health of Saquon Barkley, but in 2021, the Giants were healthy and still sucked. New York considered sticking with Joe Judge, but Dave Gettleman sort of got bullied into moving on, and I'm sure he's glad he did now. Brian Daboll has been a home run hire, and there was no doubt he's the head coach of the year. I think there's a very high chance that Daboll is actually the best play caller in the league. It's crazy what he's been able to accomplish in only 1 season in New York. I did think that the Giants were going to be one of the worst teams in the league this season, like a lot of other people did. On paper, the roster was nothing special, but Brian Daboll didn't care. The Giants fight hard, and they did all season. Even when New York was 7-2, a lot of people, including myself, we're still kind of doubting how good the team actually was. The Giants hit a blip, but they kept fighting and made the postseason. I don't think it was very surprising that New York beat the Vikings. I actually tweeted before the game that I had Minnesota, but I was really starting to lean the Giants. And, New York did it. The Vikings were lucky all season with how they were winning, and that finally had to end. I don't think that it's out of the question that the Giants beat the Eagles in the divisional round. You want to be hot going into the postseason, and Philadelphia has done the opposite. Jalen Hurts looked good in Week 18 versus the Giants, but there is definitely a shot. The reality is, New York is a very good football team, and whether or not they do move on to the NFC Championship, the Giants should be very happy and very proud of what Brian Daboll has accomplished in only his first season with the team.